Good morning, everyone. Welcome to New York Buddha Dharma. Our center is dedicated to the teachings of the Vidyadhara Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. And in the last few months, we've been discussing Trungpa Rinpoche's seminary teachings, starting with the first volume, Hinayana Mahayana Teachings. Tonight, we were scheduled to discuss chapters 12, 13, 14, and 15, but I decided that just 12 and 13 would be enough for one night, and then in a couple of weeks we'll continue on 14 and 15. Before I get started, I want to just mention that next week, April 4th, it's a Wednesday night, it's the Parinirvana, the 31st year, the Parinirvana of the passing of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. Parinirvana means the passing of a Buddha, when a Buddha passes from this world. And usually at all of our centers, we do a Sadhana Mahamudra feast. But since we only meet at this center on Monday nights, next Monday night, John Baker is going to be giving a talk, and we're also going to be practicing the Sadhana Mahamudra, because the sadhana this year is the 50th anniversary of when the Trungpa Rinpoche received the sadhana, I guess in 1968, when he was on retreat at Taksang in Bhutan. So I hope all of you can come then. And for those of you who watch us on YouTube, it should be pretty interesting, because John has been a student of the Vidyadharas since 1970, 71. So he is sort of kind of an expert in in teaching us about the sadhana. And we have copies of the texts. Tonight, we are going to be studying Chapter 12 and 13. Chapter 12 is the Buddha it's about the Buddha, and Chapter 12 is about a very traditional sutra. A sutra is a combination of the Hinayana and Mahayana wisdom and compassion text by the Buddha himself. And usually these sutras were given as a discourse between the Buddha and his disciples. Sometimes the Buddha wouldn't even say anything, but because of his mind, his disciples would have discussions with each other. And they would ask questions and give answers, and then the Buddha might give a talk on it. Now, when I read the sutra, which is chapter 12, the Sutra of the Recollection of the Noble Three Jewels, kind of sounded familiar to me. That Trungpa Rinpoche was considered to be a crazy wisdom teacher, and he taught in English, which was very unusual in the 70s when he first came here. And but in actuality, he was a very traditional Buddhist teacher. In Tibet, he was a great meditation master, the 11th Trungpa in his line. And the genius of his teachings was that he was able to, well, first of all, he spoke English. He spoke English really well. And the genius of his teachings was he was able to take the Dharma, read the texts, and then presented in a way that was very current to our situation. As a matter of fact, today I was hanging out with my daughter, who I went to seminary in 1981 in Lake Louise in Canada, Chateau Lake Louise. And my daughter came with me, she was 9 years old, and she asked me about the topic of the talk tonight. And she said to me, as I was a little nervous about giving this talk, I guess I was nervous because when you give a talk, a teaching on a teaching that a teacher gave, you want to get it right. It isn't like something I made up or something I'm thinking about, but like explaining his words, you want to get it right. So it always makes me kind of nervous to do that. But she said to me, because she went to the talks at the 1981 seminary, the Hinayana and the Mahayana talks. The only talks she didn't go to was the Vajrayana talks, which were restricted to the students who passed the Hinayana Mahayana exams. Because at seminary, you would sit for a couple of weeks, then you would have teachings, then you'd have to take tests. And if you were lucky enough to pass the Hinayana exam, then you could go on to the Mahayana. And if you were lucky enough to pass the Mahayana exam, then Rinpoche would decide whether you were good enough or ready to go on to the Vajrayana. And so I remember Nicole said to me, she said, "Mommy, if someone comes over to you in the shrine room, taps you on the shoulder, and asks you to leave, that means you're not going to be accepted into the Vajrayana. But don't get too upset about it." So I heard people talking about it, because we were up and living in this beautiful hotel. We were on the 4th floor where all the families lived, the children and the parents, and a lot of those parents were senior teachers. And so she heard the talk. And so she warned me, and I was like sick to my stomach after I heard that. And until Rinpoche actually came into the shrine room to present the first Vajrayana talk, I was convinced that I was going to be thrown out of the shrine room. So anyway, Rinpoche said that on chapter 13 about the Buddha, this sutra, the Sutra of the Collection of the Noble Three Jewels, this sutra describes the many qualities of the Buddha. And then he said, why do we describe the Buddha's qualities? Well, everybody knows the Buddha is wonderful. We study Buddhism, but why is it important to describe his qualities? We can emulate the Buddha rather than seeing him beyond our reach. That's the reason why. We are inspired by these qualities. So you listen about, all the qualities that are described in the sutra, and then say, well, I'm not like that, but maybe I could strive to be that way. And then Rinpoche goes on to say that, you could, how to do it, how to become the Buddha, how to become enlightened. So he talks about the traditional sutra and then how to do it. And basically he's saying that you do it through meditation practice, and then if you could go on retreat and deepen your practice, then that would be good too. So, and he said the Buddha means awakened one, someone who woke up from a sleep, the sleep of the samsaric world. And even though the Buddha lived a very, very long time ago, 2,560 years to be exact, maybe it's 61 now, the psychological problems that people had in those days are the same as we have now. Just the scenery has changed. We're living in a different time, and that's why Nicole said to me, just keep it current, because that's what Rinpoche always did. Because in the 70s and the 80s when he taught, everything he described was current. And so now this is a different time to 2018, so keep it current. So anyway, I think that at this point we should read the sutra. So I passed out a copy. It's very short, but getting back to the sutra, when I read it, it kind of seemed familiar to me. And then I realized, I went over to my Kagyu Munlum book. I don't know if anybody knows what this is, but it's a very thick book. And I always heard about how once a year the Kagyus get together in India and they have a whole munlam, which is going through all the teachings of the Buddha. And I always had aspiration prayers that I would like to go to a Kagyu munlam. And then in the year July 13 to 17 in 2010, the Kagyu munlam came to Karma Tekson Choling, the Karmapa's monastery in Woodstock, New York. And Trungpa Rinpoche, who's a great Tibetan Kagyu teacher, was leading the munlam, and I was like, I have to go to this munlam. So I called up my friend, because it was in Woodstock, New York. I called up my good friend Peter Goldfarb, and he had, at that time, had a beautiful house in Woodstock. And I asked him if I could stay at his house to go to the Kagyu munlam, and he said yes. He was very generous, always very generous with letting people stay at his house. And then, but he was going to be out of town. So it's a huge house, like 3 stories. And then I get a call from someone at Gampo Abbey in Nova Scotia, which used to be a Kagyu retreat center that Trungpa Rinpoche started for monastics in our Sangha. And apparently there were some monks and nuns that wanted to come from Gampo Abbey to the Kagyu munlam. And could they stay? Well, they heard that I was going, and could they stay with me? And I was like, yeah, you could stay with me. I'm staying at Peter Goldfarb's house. Yeah, there's plenty of room. So we had 4 nuns and 1 monk. And then I decided to take 3 Tibetan kids with me because, it was July. And a lot of kids that I know in New York City have plans for the summer. They go to sleepaway camp, or they do things with their family. But these 3 kids are 2 sisters and a brother. I knew them from my Milarepa Children's Theater in New York. They were my students. They had no plans. They had nothing to do. And also, as an aside, their cousin is the 17th Karmapa on their mother's side. And on their father's side, they're related to the Rangay family, the Thangka painters, who are great friends of Trungpa Rinpoche. Anyway, so I invited them to come with me, and so we all ended up in this house for the Kagyu munlam. And so the very first day, I was so excited. The monastics had a car. And, being a typical New Yorker, I don't know how to drive, didn't have a car. But we all got into their car because they drove down from Gampo Abbey, and we all went to the munlam. And I just want to describe the scene of this munlam. It's a beautiful monastery in Woodstock. Has anybody ever been there? Anyway, it's beautiful. The 16 Karmapa, it started out as a small, they donated the land to them, and it started out as a small building, but then the 16 Karmapa went there, and we all went up, and he picked the spot for the big shrine room to be, and they built a beautiful shrine room. So we drove there, and then we went into the shrine room, and it was absolutely magnificent. Everything was set up for a munlam, and it was so beautiful. The shrines and all the offerings on the shrine, all the monastics that were there. The Karmapa sent over his monks and the nuns. The monastics were sitting in front, the monks and the nuns, and then all of us were sitting in the back. And then the first thing that we chant that very first morning was, the first thing that we chanted the very first morning was the three daily observances. So first recite the 3 daily observances. The first of these is prostration. So I'm just going to read it. It's a very short little paragraph. Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arhat, completely perfect Buddha. Those are the 3 descriptions of a Buddha. The one with awareness and conduct, the Sugata, the one who knows the world, the charioteer who tames beings, the unsurpassable, the teacher of gods and humans, peerless king of the Sakyas, because he was born in the Sakya family. I touch my head to the immaculate dust at your feet and prostrate with devotion. Then it says, do prostrations at the end of each stanza. The Sutra of the meeting of Father and Son. When you, the greatest of all humans, were born, you strode 7 paces on this vast ground and said, I am supreme in this world. So when he was born, the Buddha was born in the Garden of Lumbini in Nepal. He took 7 steps and he said, I am supreme in this world. I prostrate to you wisely then. I prostrate to you who spoke wisely then. You've the purest of bodies, the finest of forms. You're an ocean of wisdom, a mountain of gold. Your fame resounds throughout the 3 worlds. I prostrate to you, the protector who achieved the ultimate. And then it says the Sutra of Rashtarapala. You have the supreme marks of your face. You have the supreme marks, your face, a stainless moon. Your color is like gold. I prostrate to and praise you. Immaculate, there's none like you in the 3 worlds. You've great and peerless wisdom. I prostrate and praise you. Best among humans, the Tathagata tames and guides us. He cuts the bonds of fetters. His faculties, peaceful, pacified, skilled in peace, to him who dwells in Saraswati, I prostrate. Protector with great compassion, omniscient one, you are the teacher. Immense field of merit and qualities, Tathagata, I prostrate to you. And then it goes on. But then, on page 7, it says, second is the recitation of sutras, the Sutra of the collection of the 3 jewels. So then, that's what Trungpa Rinpoche introduced the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha as the Sutra of collection of the 3 jewels. So it's right here, right in the beginning of the Kagyu Munlam and the Kagyu Munlam book. So a very, very traditional, old sutra. So I would like all of you to take it out and we can just recite it together and really think about the words. And after we recite it, then we will see how Trungpa Rinpoche describes and talks about all this whole sutra. Okay, so the first thing, I think we should just recite the whole thing. Even maybe I'll just do the top part and then we could all recite the Buddha. The Sutra of the Recollection of the Noble 3 Jewels. Trungpa Rinpoche expanded his discussion of the 3 jewels in the form of a commentary on the traditional sutra entitled the Sutra of the Recollection of the Noble 3 Jewels, or in Sanskrit, the Arya Ratna Traya Anamsriti Sutra. The short sutra is traditionally chanted as a way of increasing a student's devotion to the Buddha, trust in the Dharma, and respect for the Sangha. Trungpa Rinpoche included this chant in the meal liturgy he created for extended group meditation retreats, such as Vajrayana seminaries. I'm not sure, but I think what they're talking about here is the Oryoki chants. Do you remember that, John?
Yes. We chant this as the food is being brought in.
Yeah, as the food is being brought in, there's a very ritualized...
We chant it over and over again.
Yeah, there's a very ritualized way of eating at seminary that was introduced in the 1980s seminary. And as the food is being brought in, we recite this sutra. So it's a very important sutra and really very inspiring. Okay.
Oryoki comes out of the Soto Zen tradition.
The Soto Zen tradition, yeah.
He injected it into...
Wait, can you record that?
Oh. We have a Sutra Zen practitioner here.
Okay.
And he injected it into his students' practice of long meditation sessions, going on for days or months. He injected oryoki as a way of eating, and he saw it at Tassajara, and he loved it when he saw, Suzuki Roshi's students practicing sesshin, and so he co-opted it and brought it into the Tibetan style.
Yeah. So, okay. Ready? The Buddha. I prostrate to the Omniscient One. Thus the Buddha, Bhagavat, Tathagata, Arhat, Samyak Sambuddha, the learned and virtuous one, the Sugata, the knower of the world, the charioteer and tamer of beings, the unsurpassable one, the teacher of devas and humans, is the Bhagavat. The Tathagata is in accord with all merit. He does not waste the roots of virtue. He is completely ornamented with all patience. He is the basis of the treasures of merit. He is adorned with the excellent minor marks. He blossoms with the flowers of the major marks. His activity is timely and appropriate. Seeing him, he is without disharmony. He brings true joy to those who long with faith. His knowledge cannot be overpowered. His strengths cannot be challenged. He is the teacher of all sentient beings. He is the father of bodhisattvas. He is the king of noble ones. He is the guide of those who journey to the city of nirvana. He possesses immeasurable wisdom. He possesses inconceivable confidence. His speech is completely pure. His melody is pleasing. One never has enough of seeing him. His form is incomparable. He is not stained by the realm of desire. He is not stained by the realm of form. He is not affected by the formless realm. He is completely liberated from suffering. He is completely and utterly liberated from the skandhas. The dhatus have no hold on him. His ayatanas are controlled. He has completely cut the knots. He is completely liberated from extreme torment. He is liberated from craving. He has crossed over the river. He is perfected in all wisdoms. He abides in the wisdom of the Buddha Bhagavats, who rise in the past, present, and future. He does not abide in nirvana. He abides in the ultimate perfection. He dwells on the bhumi where he sees all sentient beings. All these are the perfect virtues of the greatness of the Buddha Bhagavat. So that's the sutra. Anyway, recently, just as an aside,
It's not the whole sutra, right?
we're only going to teach on the Buddha tonight.
Okay, so just one.
Yeah, oh yeah. There's more, there's the Dharma and the Sangha, but tonight we're only going to teach on the Buddha because I didn't want to rush through the Buddha. And it was so poignant to go through all the aspects. And then not next week, but the following week, I'll teach on the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha. But last month, the 17th Karmapa was giving a talk in Queens. And my daughter Nicole took a photograph of him because we were lucky enough to sit up front. And this is the photograph of him. Can you see it on the computer? Can you see it? It's so amazing because he was standing on the throne where he was sitting, and then just his image and the image of the Buddha were so striking. Anyway, yeah. Okay. So to continue our talk. So the Trungpa Rinpoche said, the sutra describes the many qualities of the Buddha, and as we read it, we see all the qualities that are described. And so why do we describe the Buddha's qualities? Because then we can emulate him. rather than seeing him as someone totally different than us. We emulate his qualities, and if we're lucky enough to have a great teacher like Trungpa Rinpoche or many other Buddhist teachers today, or read Trungpa Rinpoche's teachings, or read the Buddha's teachings, then we see that not only can we emulate him, but we could also, we're not like the Buddha because he was totally enlightened. He was completely free from the fetters of this world. But we have the same enlightened gene inside of us that he had. And when he left the palace to work with himself, when he left the palace, he was already a practicing bodhisattva. And that means he was concerned about the welfare of others. So he didn't just leave the palace because he wanted to attain something for himself, which he did. But he also really saw the suffering of other beings, and he wanted to help. And that was his inspiration to go and leave his nice, cushiony life behind him. And so it's important to remember that the Buddha was not a Buddhist. That's what Trungpa Rinpoche says. Because at that time, there was no such thing as Buddhism. He was just, his name was Siddhartha, and he was a prince, and he came from the kingdom of the Sakya, lineage. And so there was no such thing as a Buddhist or Buddhism at the time. And the reason he became known as a Buddha is because he attained enlightenment and had the qualities of an awakened person. Okay. So a Buddha means the awakened one, someone who woke up from being asleep in the samsaric world, the world that we live in, the world that we dwell in every single day. That's the samsara, the world of suffering. That's what samsara means. Just the hassles, just the hassles of everyday life, the suffering. And even though we live in a different time now, the mind still is the same. And so we just deal with different things. And if the Buddha hadn't had that enlightened gene within him, so when he left the palace, he traveled to India, and he studied with the yogis there. He sat and we did all kinds of yogic disciplines, yoga, cleansing. He starved himself. He only ate like 1 grain of rice a day. And then he began to see that all of those things are really not very helpful. And so he kind of left all these teachers and left all these yogic disciplines, and then went off by himself and sat under a Bodhi tree in the forest. And he just sat by himself and started to work with himself through meditation practice and walking meditation. And because he had already been a bodhisattva, already had great aspirations, he was able to attain enlightenment, to find what he was looking for, which is how to tame his mind. So, and then Rinpoche says that if his enlightenment wasn't genuine, if he did not sit under the Bodhi tree, if he was copying someone else, he could not have attained enlightenment. You can't attain enlightenment if you don't have the gene in you already. He couldn't, and then if he couldn't attain enlightenment, he couldn't enlighten others. And because of the Buddha and his teachings, many, many people have attained enlightenment. So if all of that wasn't genuine, if you bring anything at all to the table that's not real, that's not genuine, then it just doesn't work. It's like trying to make a cake. You have all the ingredients, but let's say you don't have an oven. It's just not going to work. Everything has to fit together. When we study the Buddha, we realize the Buddha is quite different from us. That's a really important point that he made. And kind of when I read this, I was like, oh God, this is just like endless. The Buddha is really different from us. We are not the Buddha. we have the potential, but not the realization or proclamation to make. And at the same time, Buddha is what we are. That is why we sit upright. So we see that we're not quite there yet, but we have the aspiration because he did it, and so we can do it too. And Trungpa Rinpoche always used to say, whenever we'd go to him and complain or tell him our problems, he would always say, well, you can do it. You can do it. I know you can do it. And when he would say that, it would give us courage because he never looked down on us. He realized his potential, our potential, and he encouraged us to keep working with ourselves in a genuine way. And then he would always say, keep it simple. So not bring a lot of our own neurosis into the practice. We do not have to imitate anything, for Buddha is in us already. We already have the enlightened gene. On the one hand, Buddha was a somewhat ordinary person, but, he said, only rarely, once in every 2,600 years, does someone appear who has the courage to say what is right with the world and what is wrong with the world. And that was kind of overwhelming because personally I know that the Buddha lived all those years ago, and I know the lineage and everything, but when he said only one person in 2,600 years appears to be the Buddha, then you realize that, wow, that's very rare, extremely rare. Someone who has the courage to say what is right with the world and what is wrong with the world. What was his motivation for leaving the palace? And that was his bodhisattva path. He wasn't doing it just for himself, he was doing it for others. Now, Trungpa Rinpoche talks about the source of refuge. Buddha is said to be the source of refuge because he is one person in the universe who is not confused. Who is the Buddha, the enlightened one. So what does that mean, the source of refuge? When we struggle with our own confusion every day, it seems to be that no matter how much we practice, there's all these things that come up all the time, so many struggles. And then you think, well, what am I doing? What's the point of all of this? But when you think of the Buddha, or when we think of our enlightened teachers like Trungpa Rinpoche, we think, well, that's what I always just think, well, I can't do one more prostration, but since my teacher did his Nundro when he was like a teenager, 11, 12, 13 years old, since he did it, I'm going to try my best to do it too. That's what I used to say to myself. So I'm going to do it too. And that would encourage me. But it's very, very hard because every day there's always something that comes up. But when we think of the Buddha and we think of his struggle and how he didn't give up on himself and he didn't give up on anyone else, then we think, well, enlightenment is possible and I'm going to go for it. So we can do it too. And then Rinpoche talks about how to study the three jewels. When studying the three jewels, try to understand every word, understand the logic. At some point, you may want to enter into the environment where your Buddha nature will blossom and your enlightenment will flourish, like go on retreat, or go to seminary, or do a week sitting practice, or something, take a class, come to a talk. But if you can't do any of those things, then at least sit every day, make a commitment to sitting practice every day, because that's when you can really deeply work with yourself in a very genuine way. Like the meditation instruction that John gave today was so important for us. And I think that when we think about the impermanence of the world that we live in, and we have the ability and the possibility of sitting every day, it's so, so precious, and that we shouldn't take it for granted. Because we see impermanence every day, every second in our world. And then Rinpoche said that I think he was talking about himself personally, that when he sees his students practicing, he is so, so grateful. Because when you get into a relationship with a student, then it's kind of like a pact that you make, that you're practicing and they're teaching you, but they take responsibility for you. And if they see that you're really devoting yourself to the practice, then he calls it, it's like the equivalent of, it's always limitless. He said the adoration of a teacher for practicing students is limitless and always tender. It's the Buddhist equivalent of a bleeding heart, like the Christian bleeding heart. That's a very profound way of looking at it. Then he said that in Tibetan, the word for Buddha is Sangye. Don't you have a friend that's named Sangye? Yeah. Sangye, Sang means clarified or purified, overcoming the heedlessness of habitual patterns of dwelling on our own neurosis. Sang means overcoming those patterns. It means overcoming the I or the self. So once we start practicing and studying, we're no longer that constantly concerned with ourself and trying to solidify our world. We have the possibility to look at other people and see what they need, look around our world and see what's needed. And we could always just extend ourselves. But that really can't happen genuinely without making a commitment to our practice every day. And then Rinpoche said it was like opening up the windows in a stuffy room. And Ge means expansion or blossoming, the sense of splendidness and extension, having overcome the domestication of ego. You are actually free from that. It's like a positive divorce, he said. And this day and age, everybody's getting divorced. Even celebrities and very important people. He said you're like, I calls it being in a very bad, and you feel imprisoned by your marriage. And then Ge means you have freedom from that situation. But in essence, it's like imprisoned by our life. And Ge is connected with the Vipassana principle of perceiving things as they are, properly and fully. As an aspect of the Buddha, Ge means being continuously loving and supportive of your endeavor to be free from this world. And free from this world doesn't mean that you want to escape from the world. It means free from the habitual patterns of suffering. That's the freedom. That's why I think the greatest gift we have as a human being is spiritual freedom. The freedom to be able to practice the Dharma. Because when we leave this world, we're going to leave everything, all the little tchotchkes we've collected all those years, packed with stuff. We can't take any of that with us. And the only thing that we will have to count on when we leave this world behind is what we've practiced, and what we've learned, and what we've attained. That's it. That's the bottom line. So being attached to all these material things, it just doesn't work in the end. You can have them, but not to see yourself as part of that. So you are no longer trapped, but you are opening. That is the spirit of the Buddha or Sangye, which applies to ourselves as well as the Buddha principle altogether. Ge is connected with the ayatanas or the senses. you are relating with seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking, with awareness and mindfulness. So all our perceptions are continuing, but we're just not trapped by them anymore. I mean, you could talk about, food, but you don't have to go out and like continuously buy all the stuff and go to all the restaurants. And I mean, you can do that and enjoy it, but it's not like you're completely like absorbed by that and run by that, like eating bad, cheap food and things like that. Anyway, instead, you develop your senses and you develop an awareness of them. So you, like, let's say when we're practicing sitting, things come up. You see what comes up, but you're not, like, you don't have to get up every second and just, like, you don't have to get up every second from your sitting practice and just continue on with that thought. You can actually just relax in it, in the perceptions that come up. So you're free of the ayatanas with all these sense perceptions, and at the same time very perceptive of them. So you're not caught up in them. That's the bottom line. And with sitting meditation, during sitting meditation and awareness practice, when you hear a sound, the sound is not produced by preconceptions. It's simply a sound. So when we hear the gong ring, it's just a gong. We can enjoy the sound, but it's just a gong. And so the color is black, the color is red, whatever it is that comes up, we can experience and enjoy the sense pleasures, but we're not driven by them. The Sutra of the Recollection of the Three Noble Jewels introduces several traditional Sanskrit terms for the Buddha. Since these terms qualify what a Buddha should be, it might be helpful to look at them. So now Rinpoche goes in and describes all these terms that we read about in the sutra. The Sanskrit term for Buddha, what a Buddha should be. So here are the 4 definitions of a Buddha, or the 4 names of a Buddha. It's a Bhagavat, Tathagata, Arhat, Samyak Sambuddha. So these are all the references of a Buddha's name that we read in books and read in sutras. And then he goes on to describe. So the first one is Bhagavat. Bhagavat, one who has conquered the 4 maras, is wakeful and has gone beyond both worldly virtues and unworldly virtues. So Bhagavat has 3 categories: conquering, possessing, and transcending. In Tibetan, Bhagavat is Chondendi. It means conquering the 4 maras, evil, seductive forces, demons or devils. I really like that, demons or devils. Evil, seductive forces. So I mean, in the modern day age, and what are demons and devils? I don't know, can anybody, like, what are our demons and devils in 2018? Instantaneous gratification. Anything? I mean, personally, you've got to think of it personally. What are our demons and devils? Greed. Yeah, greed. For me, it's sugar. That would be the top of my list. Anything else? Anyway, to think about it. At the Hinayana level, the 4 maras are simply obstacles or enemies to the path. So I would say in this day and age, I would say when I first got my computer and put it on the desk, I was like, this is the new shrine. I saw it right then. This is the new shrine. Because instead of going to your shrine to practice in the morning, you go and open your computer. Or now it's like an iPhone. You don't have to have a computer. We see that everywhere we look. People are always on the phone. They're not looking out anymore. Chon means one is conquering any such negative possibilities. One has Dharma power over those who prevent the practice of Dharma. Den means possessing. In this case, it means possessing the powers of wakefulness, kindness, and profundity. Day is related with the transcending. One cannot call so this means that once someone attains Buddhahood, you can't take it back. Once someone has actually become a Buddha, they are totally a Buddha, and you can't take it back. Now the four maras, the four obstacles or maras are Devaputra Mara. We want to make our life pleasurable. This one I really loved. We want to make our life pleasurable, taking time off from true learning with pleasure. This obstacle makes us want to make our experiences pleasurable all the time, whether by attaining enlightenment or by whatever other means. So I remember when, it's like when you go on retreat, someone has to have the best room. Like at seminary, you had to have a suite. And then you get someone to do your laundry for you. You get someone to iron your clothes. And then instead of going to sitting at 7 a.m., you just find your way to the children's dining room at 8 a.m. and have breakfast with the kids. So you didn't have to do oryoki. And then maybe at 9 o'clock you'd go to a class, or you'd go back to sitting if it was sitting. And it's like these people, they just kind of had used the seminary at their convenience. So they were at seminary, which is great. But, when I was at seminary, I didn't have to go to morning sitting because I had a 9-year-old. I could see all the little ways that I could get out of everything if I wanted to. But then I used to think, well, it took me so long to get here, and it's like such a struggle. I might as well practice. So I'd go to the shrine room at 7 a.m. and do it. Anyway, they're all different ways, even when you're at the top of deception. There's all different ways of deception, deceiving yourself constantly. We're always doing it. And then the next one is the Klesha Mara, the thought patterns and dreams which can become evil demons, the state of your mind. So he says, anything, we have to actually, the possible to realize enlightenment or to wake up, all such kleshas are counterproductive. So it doesn't work. And then the Skandamara is number 3, habitual patterns that stop us from cheering up. So, the form, feeling, perception, anything that can, that we cling onto will stop us from being cheerful. So even if, let's say you say, oh, I want a great meal, you go to a restaurant, you eat the food, everything's nice, and then you say, oh God, why did I eat that? And I'm going to get fat, or I'm going to get sick. It's like you can't even enjoy your life because you're always worried about everything. And the Yamamara, the last obstacle is the Yamamara, the Lord of Death. We have a problem relating with death. We aren't able to properly relate with ourselves, our death, or the corrosion of our body as we get older. So, this is what we see in ordinary society when people get plastic surgery, or everybody's getting Botox, and because God forbid you should have a line on your face, God forbid you should have a gray hair, God forbid you look in the, I shouldn't say God forbid, but you look in the mirror and you don't look 20 anymore, maybe you look like 22, or God forbid you should have a wife that's beautiful, but, she just had a baby and I'm not into her anymore, so I'm going to get myself a 22-year-old. Or I'm going to get myself whatever. It's just endless of how you can avoid anything in waking up and being right in the moment and really appreciating your life. And then the second name for a Buddha is Tathagata. And that means the Tathagata has gone beyond. And what has he gone beyond? They have traveled the path and achieved the result. Buddha has gone beyond, so there is a lineage connection. And he's gone beyond suffering, being attached to or being driven by all these sufferings of the world. It is a fresh world. Oh, and this is kind of depressing. Rinpoche said, this world is very rare, a very rare world. And he said it's uncooked. It is a fresh world, and in this world you get all sorts of feedback. He said there were many Buddhas before Shakyamuni Buddha who was the one person in our era, so the world that we're living in now, our era, who became a Buddha. Buddhahood is not a unique situation, but Buddhas are quite common. There are hundreds and hundreds of them. At the same time, although there are many Buddhas, they only appear rarely. This world is a very rare one, too, at least uncooked. It is a fresh world, and in this world, you get all sorts of feedback. So for another Buddha to be born in this world has to die. That's what he said, the world has to die. The world will exhaust itself, and then it will start all over again. And then he said, so I was thinking, I really am very attached to this planet. Maybe I've lived on other planets before, but every time I look at this planet, I say, this planet is so great, it's so beautiful, I love this planet so much. But then to think of how we're destroying it constantly and so quickly every single day, it's like really speeding up. Pretty soon, it might not be here anymore. According to Rinpoche, this planet won't be here anymore. And then it'll have to start up again. He said, dead or not, the world is a trick. So, and then the third name for a Buddha is Arhat. Arhat means the one who is worthy. In Tibetan, it's Trungpa. Dra means enemy, Chom, as before, means conquering, and Pa makes it a noun. So altogether, Trungpa is one who conquers the enemy. So when one is an Arhat, the attack of the four Maras and whatever other obstacles there may be have been completely conquered. So a Buddha is not hassled by any of that. For an Arhat, the attainment of enlightenment is not a threat to anybody's existence. Though he's talking about how when people become famous, they have to keep up the fame and continuously keep it up, because someone else will come along and take that fame away from you. One minute you're famous, the next minute you could be a nobody. And now with people, when you look at celebrities, one minute they're so hot and everybody wants them, next minute they're like, what happened to them? Or, they do crazy things. But when you're a Buddha, you're not subject to that. In case of an Arhat, conquering one's enemies means being free from credentials, even the credentials of enlightenment. There are no credentials. You're just who you are. So that's kind of like a relief. Then Shakyamuni Buddha, Samyak Sambuddha, the fourth name of a Buddha, is Sakya in Tibetan is Yang Dek. Yang means utterly or completely. Dakpe means pure. So Yang Dek is a person who has purified themselves completely, completely attained Buddhahood. Samyak refers to being free of hangovers or any kind of previous lives or previous experiences. It's just completely empty of that. And Sambuddha is the perfect Buddha, or in Tibetan it's Dzogpe Samge. Dzogpa, the undeclined form of Dzogpe, means fully completed. And Sangye is Buddha. So altogether, Samyak Sambuddha means completely pure, perfect Buddha. So the Buddhahood is completely genuine, the best of all. Such a Buddha's attainment is beyond both samsaric Buddhahood and nirvanic Buddhahood. It's beyond any hassles that reality might present. They have already conquered them completely. So it's a totally different world than what we see. The attainment of Buddhahood is completely pure, completely real. Buddha has gone beyond the two levels, and here the two levels are the ego of self and the ego of phenomena. The two egolessnesses, and he has gone beyond egolessness, so nothing is problematic for him. We could call it 500% purity. Zog means everything is gone beyond that. Everything that needs to be achieved is achieved. It is found in the Vajrayana as Dzogchen or Mahaati, which also means gone beyond. In Vajrayana language, we called it crazy wisdom. And Trungpa Rinpoche was considered to be a crazy wisdom teacher. And so many of the ways that he taught was very unusual. And some people would say it was very crazy. But because he was not attached to any of these modern day hassles of wanting to be the star, wanting to be the best, wanting everyone to like him, playing into everyone's egos, he was just who he was. And he presented the Dharma in a very pure way. And then people would just, if you wanted to be his student, you did the best you could. Crazy refers to utterly overleaping any possible mental games. Such obstacles are completely scooped out and thrown away. So, then the last thing he talks about the epithets for the Buddha. Has two parts. The Buddha is referred to in the Sutra as the learned and virtuous one, insight of shamatha and vipassana. And the second one is virtuous. The Buddha knows how to walk on the path, therefore he is virtuous. The 8 superior ways of seeing, or the 8 noble path, the 8 limbs of vipassana, is view, understanding, speech, end of karma, livelihood, effort, recollection, and meditation. And the qualities of a Buddha, Tathagata, is in accord with all merit. He is completely liberated from suffering, free from passion, aggression, and ignorance. All these are the perfect virtues of the greatness of the Buddha Bhagavat. So, basically, that's the end of chapter 13. So if anyone has any questions. One.
One of the Buddha that you describe is free of being stained by experiences. What happened to people who actually have amnesia or got into an accident and they completely do not have the burden of memories anymore, which is like burdens of habits and all the neurosis. So by erasing those kind of restraint, is that anywhere closer to the Buddhahood?
What do you think?
I don't want to remember anything.
What?
Just wish I don't have any memory, so, yeah.
How come?
Blank canvas and brain page.
How come?
Because I think learning is a process of conditioning. Lots of them are actually very based on the survival instinct and very far from living the way as it is, not having to have a fear for things behind all the learning. Actually, I think all the learning, all the civilization is based on, the premises that we're going to die one day and all the dangers around us. So Yeah, but then that also creates lots of neurosis within us, which is constantly circulating, useless survival, fight. Yeah.
But how does that get in your way?
When it's doing this mouse within the maze thing, just keep on running without. It's a mechanical thing. It's very mechanical. It's not. When it becomes so mechanical, then it's constant repetition of.
Yeah, well, that's what Rinpoche was talking about when he said that the sutra talks about when we start practicing, then we start to notice things. We notice how our mind works. And when we notice that, we don't have to become enslaved by it. That's the thing. That things come up all the time. We don't have to get depressed by them either. I mean, it's painful. It can be very painful. But I mean, someone that has amnesia, I always wonder, if you don't have a memory anymore, what about the memory in your body? Like if someone doesn't have a memory, if they want to cross the street, can they cross the street? Can they do anything at all? I mean, it's just like, I just think that the body automatically can do things that the mind doesn't even remember. Like if I can't remember something, I always say, well, just keep going because something's gonna work. Don't worry about it. And then kind of like your body kind of takes over and just knows how to do certain things. So, I mean, it's a good question. But, John, what do you think about amnesia?
I think if you damage in your mind, it makes it much more difficult in any way. To tread the path, to work on yourself, you need all of the equipment, neurotic or sane. And if it's damaged in some way and there's some piece of it missing, you've been seriously compromised.
Yeah, okay, that's a very important point because some people think if I didn't have a memory of that, or if I had amnesia and I didn't have to remember that painful thing that happened, because some people, I mean, have very, very painful memories, horrible things that happen to people, horrible.
And that is material for the path. That gives you a powerful material to work with.
Exactly.
Yeah, and if you remove that part of the brain that can function that way, the person is very disadvantaged.
Yeah. So, I mean, it takes a great amount of courage, to work with this kind of path, because it's so genuine, it's so real, and there are no breaks, basically. I mean, what do people in this room do to take breaks? Like, everybody's got something that they do to take a break. Like for me, I like to go to the movies. So if I'm like completely, I've had enough of everything that I've done, I say, oh, I'm just going to go to the movies. And I never planned going. I was like, I'm going to go out, go to the movie theater, and if there's anything playing that I like, I'm just going to go see it. And that to me is a break. It's kind of not a bad break, but it's still, I recognize it as being a break. See what I'm saying? So it's kind of like a subtle break from dealing with what I'm dealing with. But everyone has it. But when you're really treading on the path, there are no breaks. Like, I don't think Milarepa took breaks. But anyway, what else? John?
But when we are actually in a flow of things, we don't really need memory, do we? Or any skill?
Well, I mean, when you think about Shakyamuni Buddha, what were his memories? I mean, he lived a very nice life. He lived in a palace. Everyone loved him. He had all the great attributes. He was handsome. He was good at everything he did. He was smart. He lived a very sheltered life. He had a beautiful wife, child. What was his aspiration to leave a wonderful situation like that and go out into the world? And there was a lot of hardships that he went through. So his aspiration was, to work with himself, and also he was very concerned about other people. And so I think that's a really important point, that no matter what we've gone through in our life, and some people, I mean, even if you haven't gone through a lot of horrible things like wars and starvation and all these crazy things that happen, like the shooting at that school in Florida and all the other schools, these are real disasters. But, like emotional turmoils with families and all kinds of things. We still have to confront all of these things, that psychological things, physical things, everyday life that we have to work with. But what's our aspiration for really doing that? I mean, why should we even bother? I mean, someone told me about their friend who every single day goes to either a movie or a play, and sometimes they do an afternoon play and then an evening movie or something like that. And so 7 days a week, that's all they do. And I was like, oh my God, that sounds so claustrophobic. I mean, I was feeling guilty about going to the movies once in a while, but every single day, because someone that does that has to actually love the theater so much in a genuine way, or they hate their life so much that they've got to get out of it every second. I mean, as practitioners, we see the pitfalls of that kind of thinking. And so we try to work with ourselves in a bigger way. And it's because we're really not that, we don't really benefit ourselves from that kind of, ignorance, like ignoring. And we really can't be of use to others. And why are we here? We're here to help other people. So I don't know. I mean, when we look at, like the Buddha, what he did, he inspired generations and generations over thousands of years of practitioners, and we're still being inspired and still talking about him. And our own personal teacher, Trungpa Rinpoche, or any of the teachers that you study with, they dedicated their entire lives to helping us. And because really, when you get down to it, it's such a genuine way of living our life. It's such a noble way of living our life, and very helpful. So.
Yeah, but I think Buddha knew that his life was a lie. It was artificial wall built around him, so he would not see the outside. Imagine Buddha is from the outside. Would he be a Buddha? Imagine he has experienced all that since he was a child. Would he have that kind of compassion? The distance, being able to compare the lie of his life to the real, so-called more real world, which is just for sufferings. I cannot imagine Buddha is somebody who come from a very poor, peasant family and gain that kind of enlightenment. You just don't have that kind of depth of comparison.
Oh, no.
Following Shakyamuni Buddha. after Shakyamuni Buddha, there were many other people who achieved enlightenment, and many of them came from very humble backgrounds. I mean, Tilopa was a beggar, and what? Yeah, but they became Buddhas in their own right.
Yeah, but they have something to build up.
Yeah, they already had Buddha's teaching.
I mean, and perhaps if the Buddha had been poor, then you would say, well, a prince couldn't have achieved Buddhahood. He had to have been poor. It's just the way he was.
Well, I think that that's a good point. But I think that in terms of Shakyamuni Buddha, in that day and age, where a Buddha was born, he was born in India. And in India at that time was like the point of the planet, on this planet Earth, where there was so much spirituality happening. It was a very amazing place. And so that's one thing. He was born in the right place. And the second part was that at that time there was a very rigid caste system in India. And if he would have been born a beggar and the lower caste, nobody would have paid any attention to him. But he was born in a very high caste in the kingdom, and he was a Brahmin, which was the highest caste. And so people had respect for him. He was a Brahmin.
He was
a warrior?
Yeah, a warrior class.
But he was a Brahmin. But warrior class Brahmin. You can't be both? Oh, I don't know. But that's what I always heard, that he was a Brahmin. That's what the Sri Lankans told me. In the Buddhist council, he was a Brahmin. I don't know. Anyway, so because he was of a higher class, whatever class he was, people would pay more attention to him than if he was an untouchable, let's say. Even though when he started practicing and when he was a Buddha, he abolished the caste system within his own Sangha, because he was enlightened, so he didn't see people as being different. And he did a lot of amazing social things, like allowing women to come into to be nuns in the Sangha, abolishing the caste system, and so in a way, he was a real social activist for that time. So for this world that we're in now, he was born in the perfect place. The next Buddha that comes, I think it's going to be Maitreya. What's the next Buddha? And I heard that Taisitu Rinpoche is supposed to be Maitreya in the future, the next Buddha. Anyway, so that's about it. Anyone else have any other things to ask? Okay, so now let's dedicate the merit. So that everything that we have learned and practiced today we dedicate to everyone else. You know, just to end, Trungpa Rinpoche always said that don't underestimate the power of your practice. So no matter what we do, every time we sit down, every time we read something, every time we study something that's related to the Dharma is huge. And we shouldn't underestimate ourselves of what the power is, what we're doing, and keep going. So encourage you all to do that. And if you can, read the sutra every day to be inspired. By this merit, may all obtain admissions, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great East, may the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.